Hi everybody, so this is how to read sheet music with Oscar Alvarez, and that's me. So sheet music could be useful for a number of instruments like a saxophone, like a bass, or like a piano. In this case, we're going to be talking mostly about piano, the way I learned it. So the first thing we have to establish is that the Western scale has 12 notes. Starting alphabetically, you go to A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then the black keys. Now the black keys have two names, and the reason being is because sharp is a half step forward and flat is a half step backward. Now if you go to C, you go one half step up, you get C sharp. If you go to D, you go to half step back, you get D flat. So that's how that works. It's the same note but with two different names relative to the key that's either behind or in front of it. And the reason that this C is not counted in the 12 notes is because it's the same note as this C. It's just a higher version of it. So it's 12 different notes. So now let's get to actually reading sheet music. Here we have these 5 lines, also known as a staff. And you've probably seen some weird symbol next to it if you've ever seen it before. It looks sort of like this. This is called treble clef. Now what the treble clef does is it tells us what order the notes are going to be on the staff. So when you see a treble clef, you know that the notes will be ordered in this fashion right here. So you can see that the bottommost line is an E, the space is an F, G, and then it switches back to A, B, C, D, E, F. So this might seem tricky at first, but there's some ways of remembering it, like mnemonic devices. A very popular one for the line notes, as you can see, is E, G, B, D, and F, goes like this. Every good boy does fine. So E, G, B, D, F. Every good boy does fine. That's a really quick way to remember once you start by the bottom line all the way to the top line. Now you know each note. The one for the spaces is actually really simple. If you read up, it goes F, A, C, E, which is face. So that one's really simple. You probably won't forget it. Now when it comes to reading and writing sheet music, you're not just confined to this line, and all the spaces in between. You can actually go below the lines. And so in this case, let's say below the E line. Since it's below the E line, it's one note below, that's the note D. And you can go even further than that. You can do this. And this is what's known as a ledger line. A ledger line is a levitating line that kind of acts like to create a space in between it. And since this is one below D, this is called C. And this is a C note. But it's not just any C. When it comes to the treble clef, this C with the ledger line is considered middle C, because if you were to play this on the piano, this would be right in the center of the piano. And it's a very common note when it comes to learn to read sheet music. And so the same applies above the topmost line. So let's say we had a note here. This note is one above F, so consequently it should be a G, and it is a G. And if we were to do the same thing that we did in the bottom up here, creates this space, creates this levitating line, and the note above G would be an A. So there you go. You can see that there can be a ledger line on the top and on the bottom if you want to go beyond the limits of this 5 lines and 4 spaces of the staff. So congrats, you just learned how to read sheet music. Just kidding. I got you. You really thought it'd be this simple. Come on. It's probably you guys right now being all sad and stuff. And it's gonna get even worse when I tell you that this right here is a bass clef. There's a bass clef, bro. I'm not kidding. So yeah, there's a whole other clef called the bass clef. It's usually for the left hand when you're playing the piano. So these are the notes in the order that they go. So as you can see, it's a little different than the treble clef. You got the G on the bottommost line. It ascends each space line, all the way to A on the topmost line. So of course I have terrible memory, and now we have 2 clefs. But somebody came up with a mnemonic device for this one as well. So it goes like this for the line ones. Good boys do fine always. So every good boy does fine, good boys do fine always. They kind of match up quite well. And then for the spaces, I guess ascending, it spells out Ace G. Yeah, I'd just say try your best with that one. Okay, so now that we know which notes to play, we need to know how long do we play the notes. So let's go back to that staff we like so much. We're gonna put this clef here. The rhythm doesn't change no matter the clef. The only thing that changes with the clef is the organization of the notes, but rhythm stays the same. Now, you'll see when you're reading music that this staff has some separations, has some lines in between it, and that's all completely normal. These are called measures. Each partition of the staff is called a measure. And now for each measure, there's a certain number of beats. The way we determine that number of beats is with something called a time signature, which looks like this, a fraction of two numbers. Alright, so we got 4, 4. Now, what do these numbers represent? Well, the bottom number represents which type of note gets one beat. In this case, when it's 4, it's a quarter note, which I'll be explaining shortly. Then, the top part of the time signature represents how many beats are within each measure. So you've probably seen this symbol before in music. Well, this one, if you don't know, is called the quarter note. And so this note is what is assigned one beat by the 4/4 time signature, meaning that each measure can have 4 quarter notes, 4 beats, 4 quarter notes per measure. And so you do the same with each measure. Now you might be thinking, 4/4, there's math in music and time signature? What's that, like a clock's autograph? But it's actually a fairly common time signature, 4/4. And most people, without even knowing what a time signature is, will understand this concept because most popular songs actually are in 4/4. And the way that we move to the song actually reflects this time signature. Mary Had a Little Lamb, We Will Rock You by Queen, and Love Sosa by Chief Keef. What do all these instant classics have in common? Well, you might have guessed it, they're all in 4/4. Now, I'll tell you, my singing chops are not very good. My rapping chops are even worse. So, you can count on me when I tell you that Mary Had a Little Lamb, We Will Rock You, Love Sosa. If you were to count the beats, you get 4 beats every time. So we know that when we're in 4/4, a quarter note is equal to 1 beat. Now, what other notes are there? Well, there's the half note, which looks like a quarter note, but the circle is empty. And that half note is equal to 2 beats. So 2 quarter notes makes 1 half note. And there's also the whole note, which just looks like an empty circle. The whole note is equal to 4 beats. So it takes 2 half notes to make up the time of a whole note and 4 quarter notes to make the time of a whole note because it's 4 beats. Now, what if we wanted to play faster than a beat? Well, then we have eighth notes. Eighth notes look like quarter notes, but they got a flag on them. You might also see them like this when they're connected together. Those are half a beat. So 2 of them, like in this example, is the same duration, the same amount of time as a quarter note, which is 1 beat. And you can go even smaller with a 16th note, which looks like an 8th note, but it has 2 flags. And when you have them together, they look like this. They got 2 lines, and that's how you know for a fact that it's a 16th note. And obviously, the 16th note is a quarter beat. You need 4 of them to make a quarter note, and you need 2 of them to make an 8th note. So by now you're probably thinking, man, so much information, so many notes. Can't there just be some peace and quiet? Well, can you believe it? That sheet music has a solution for that as well. It's called rests. So now take a rest. What rests are the very complete opposite of what notes are. Rather than playing something, you're just not playing something. For a certain amount of time, of course. If you want to not play something for 1 beat, you got the quarter rest, which looks like a squiggle. That looks like kind of like the lips and the beginning of a nose of a person. You got the half rest. You see they're very similar names. The half rest is, of course, 2 beats. And this one, you'll see it's a little thing on the staff. Looks like a hat. Yeah, it looks like a hat. You also got the whole rest. Of course, it's 4 beats. This one is the very opposite of the half rest. Upside down hat. I'm not even kidding. It looks like that. You got the 8th rest, which is half a beat of silence, which looks like an upside down fishing rod. And then similarly to the 8th rest, you got the 16th rest, quarter beat. Instead of a flag, it's got like some double fishing rod action, and that'll be a quarter beat of silence. Now, to recap what we learned, let's go to the first 4 measures of a song we all know and love. Mary Had a Little Lamb. So going through the first 4 measures, the notes are as follows. E, D, C, D, E, E, E. This underscore blank is a rest. D, 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 rest. E, G, G, rest. Now you can see that each note represents a syllable, represents a beat inside of the song. And according to this time signature, remember, the bottom means that a quarter note is equal to 1 beat. And there's going to be 4 quarter notes. That's 4 beats per measure. So that means that each syllable is going to be 1 quarter note. So let's get started by writing it. We know that a quarter note looks like this. Let's start off with E, the first note. E, as we remember, every good boy does fine, is the first bottommost line. So now we go to D. D should be right below it. Remember, we can go outside of these in-between lines. We can go right below it. And then we got C. C is actually below D, but we're going to need a ledger line to make it more cohesive. That represents the C. And then we need the D again. So the D is right below the E line. And right there you see we have 1 measure because there's 4 quarter notes. That's 4 beats. Now let's keep going. We got E. We know where E is. It's on the line. We got 3 of those. And then we have a rest. Now since it's 4 beats, we have to put a quarter rest to fill up the space. Then it's 4 beats per measure. So I forgot what that looks like. It looks like that, sort of like a squiggle. But that's 1 beat of silence. 1 beat rest. That's a quarter rest. So let's keep on going. We got D, D, D. Another rest because it's blank. Just a random squiggle. You already know what it is. And to finish it off, we got E and then G. Where's G? Every good boy does fine. So G is right here on the second line. And there's 2 G's. We're going to put 2 quarter notes there. And it's a blank, a rest. So we're going to do the squiggle. So right there, we just wrote the first 4 measures of Mary Had a Little Lamb using all the concepts that we've learned. So congratulations on getting a gold star for how to read sheet music. Now with these very basic foundational concepts, you should be able to go up and running with pretty much half of all sheet music you'd like. But of course, there's a lot more complicated music theory concepts that I didn't even dive into. So it's up to you if you want to keep going, but at least you know the basics and can start learning your favorite songs. So I hope you learn all of them on your own time using these concepts. Hopefully you understood it and you have a great time doing it, because that's what music is all about.